Well, sitting here with four-time Iditarod champion, youngest champion ever, Dallas Seavey. Thank you very much. Let's do a little timeline. So we'll start back in April. You get a call from Mark Nordman.
Yeah.
And basically he says that you tested positive for a drug.
Yep, he said a number of our dogs had tested positive in Nome after the finish. And kind of the brass tacks, I was out mushing with my daughter, doing a little overnight spring mushing, and yeah, talk about the worst possible phone call, right? And immediately the question is, what? How? Where? What is it? Told me it was tramadol. I'd never heard of that drug before. So what does it do? He said it's an opioid painkiller. And I mean, immediately I told him, you know, I've never given any banned substance to my dogs. I've never knowingly broken any race rule. Something's going on here. So this led to a couple weeks, perhaps more than a month of phone calls back and forth periodically. You know, I was trying to figure out what the heck happened. And as we got digging into it, I felt like it was pretty compelling evidence that based on the limited information they gave us at that time, when we asked for the drug test, it was this much of a Word document that somebody had typed up saying that, you know, XXA and XXB, you know, the tag numbers blacked out or whatever, had tested positive. And here's the amounts, and it was, you know, the instrument was noted to be saturated / overloaded, and they say it was very high levels in there, and so
you did receive documentation, but it was in a Word document
3
format.
paragraphs in a Word document at this point that says that, I mean, it's pretty much said that, you know, XXA, which presumably is the team number, with, instead of actually being the number, just some X's and then the letter that should designate a certain dog, had tested for tramadol. But nothing in there was connecting that to me or my dogs, which, I mean, I took their word for it, right? I had to believe what they're saying at this point. And as we get into it, I went back and forth with Mark, and you know, obviously the test in Nome is a known test. It's not like it's a surprise, and for us to have insanely high levels at this point, I think it was pretty clear that I'm the least likely person to have given this to the dogs.
And you say Mark Nordman agreed and said, or well, at least said, I understand what you're saying, and this is not going to be an issue moving forward. Your name's not going to be out there. After a couple
weeks, he said that he had talked to, you know, there's a few people organizationally that were privy to the information and aware of what was going on. So the last call in that segment that I had with Mark Nordman, he told me that he had spoken with Andy Baker and I think another board member as well, and relayed kind of what was going on and said that this is done. It's a finished issue. That was my understanding. I don't want to say assumed, but I was of the understanding that them looking at the same stuff I had, I told them our experiences and what some suspicions that we may have had in there, and I felt like that was the conclusion that they came to, and said this is, you know, this is dealt with. He assured me that, you know, we'd be making the Iditarod would be making some serious security changes to make sure that this didn't happen again, and I think it's over.
So we fast forward a couple months, and then there's some rumblings about a Musher X, and so it basically somehow resurfaced, and you knew that who they were talking about, and you believed that the Iditarod Trail Committee or the board leaked out things that the mushing community would know without saying Dallas Seavey tested positive. They could say, oh, that sounds like Dallas Seavey, and so they wanted to, for reasons that we don't know.
The next thing I heard was the October 9th press release that said that there was a musher that tested positive in the top 20. 4 of their dogs tested positive for a banned substance. That press release went out in such a way that it made it clear that the Iditarod believed this person was guilty, and based on some small technicality in their rule, they couldn't pursue it, but this was a guilty party. That's how I read it, and that's how the media read it. That's what precipitated the following headlines. The drug cheat will be allowed to race again in 2018. Obviously, this came as a big surprise for me. I mean, where did this come from? In some communications with the race, they did a follow-up kind of press release that just entrenched their position a little bit more, saying that this was tramadol, a class 4 banned substance or whatever it is, and it certainly makes it look like this person is guilty. And then I think from our standpoint, we're trying to get the rest of the story. Why is this the information that's coming out? None of what we talked about before, none of what I felt like led to the conclusion that somebody made. I don't know who, but that's where the Musher X letter came out, and then the Iditarod came over the top very hard and said on pretty certain terms that they believed Musher X was guilty. That's certainly been the assertion that has been perceived and that I have certainly felt in this process.
And then there was some pushback from the Mushers to release the name of Musher X. Wade Mars kind of spearheaded that, wrote a letter, people signed it.
My understanding of that situation was what the Mushers, I wasn't at the meeting, but I believe the signatures that they had was the roll call for the meeting. And I think what they had agreed on is, as it pertains to the drug test, that they wanted transparency. And in the notes it was, Musher X, blah, blah, blah. But regardless, there's definitely some pushback from the Mushers. Understandably, what they had been given from the Iditarod was that there was a guilty Musher that had drugged their dogs, and the Iditarod's not going to say it. So I think their immediate thought is, who is the board protecting? When we put out our side of the information, a lot of people started scratching their heads, saying, well, there is another side to this story. And during those first 3 press releases from the Iditarod, I think, the October 9th, October 17th, and then the response to Musher X, during that time, before my name had been published, there was certainly, I feel, information that was getting out that was pointing very directly to me, not least of which was information in the response to Musher X, which very specifically identified me. They said that we had, elective blood tests at the end of the race. I was the only musher that was doing that. Everybody knew immediately in the mushing community. And I feel like the race, or whoever's calling the shots, intended that for the public, they were going to know that there was a positive test and it was going to be out there, and that the race was making stricter rules. For the mushers, they were going to know who it was, and I'm not going to be able to, protest anything that the board does or say anything. I'm seriously undermined at this point.
And we've touched on this before, but you think that this may have been repercussions for challenging the board via two-way communications and different things like that, challenging some of the rules?
I certainly think that how this thing was handled, they were not at all squeamish about making it, uncomfortable. And I think one of the things that Chaz St. George said in an interview really sums up my concerns on this, and that is, I'm not going to try to quote him exactly, but to the point of, once we realized that we couldn't prove that he had done it, there was no reason to pursue it. There was no reason to, keep digging. And I think that's exactly it. From their perspective, there was no incentive to clear me. They didn't want me to be cleared. It was better just to suppose that I had done it, and that's what's really been infuriating is I want to find out what happened. I want to know what's going on here.
And that's where we are today. But they didn't think it was going to blow up.
I don't think
at the level
it was ever,
that it had. They wanted to keep it maybe within the mushing community, kind of have something to hold on you, or at least this is what you think.
I think it was, and again, I don't want to say all of them, because I think we have different factions within the race itself. But I think there were certain individuals in key positions calling those shots that wanted this to be known that it was me that had the positive test, at least within the mushing community, which is essentially your family. It's your colleagues, and I think that's pretty damaging, especially when I've been the one that has been working with the mushers in different times on issues like the phones, and then also I think the subsequent trailer rule, which I think was rolled out kind of after the phone thing, and this just took it a step farther.
So with all that out there, here we are today. Have you seen any tests? I know you've made requests back in October, or was it November, with your PR firm that out of San Francisco. You requested to see the full toxicology reports. So
in the initial portion of this phase, all the way back in April, I asked to see the urine test, right? I'm not a toxicologist. I don't know what the heck we're even looking for. So they send me 3 paragraphs on a Word document. It's okay. At least now we start looking at it. It never crossed our mind that wasn't us. They said it was, so we tended to believe them. So we were looking at this information, working off a very limited bit, and then once this thing blew up in October, and clearly it's coming back to life, at this point, we got some legal counsel, and he said, all right, show me what you have, and he said, this is it. And so then we made a formal request through the lawyer, to the ITC's lawyer, wanting all the drug testing information, everything, chain of custody, our test information, A to Z. And it took a couple weeks, I believe, to get back an initial, it's a fair amount of documentation, maybe 120 pages of information from the lab, but it's only kind of certain parts. So there's stuff about the tramadol, but not the broader urinalysis. None of that's there. And then also, there is nothing ever that has connected me to this drug test. Not one piece of documentation that says that these drug tests that they're sending me are at all connected to me or my dogs. And that's starting to be, suspicious, quite frankly. We did a follow-up request based on our toxicologist looking at the limited information that we have received, saying, here's what I need to be able to do more in-depth, research into this. We need to have all this other documentation. That was sent to the race, and 5 days after it was sent, we had heard not a single word back from them. I then called Stan Hooley and said, did you get the email? What's going on? And they confirmed that they had received the email, and now it's been a month since that request and still nothing. 2 months since the initial request, and much of what was on the second request was on the first request as well. It just wasn't provided. And so here we are, 9, 10 months later? I don't know. And I still have not seen a urinalysis. I still have not seen anything that connects me to any positive test. And I'm beginning to wonder, does it exist? Who made the decisions? And what information do they use to make that decision? I would assume, or I did assume, that the Iditarod had pulled this information together, looked at everything, made a conclusion before making some statement where they come out publicly and said that I have a positive test. They made that statement. So we assumed when we request the information, they're going to take the file off their desk and send it to us. That's been 2 months. So if they never looked at it, how did they make any decision? Where is this information? Why is it that they can't provide us anything that connects us to this test or show us the urinalysis? Either it doesn't exist, it wasn't our test, or there's something in there that they don't want us to see. So why can't they give us this information?
You just said they haven't looked at it. How do you know that the Iditarod has not looked at this complete test?
A few reasons. First of all, I know they have not looked at this test because when we've requested the information, they tell us, oh, we're going to have to go to the lab to get that. None of this was collected. None of it was collected at the ITC. None of it had been reviewed. I talked to Stu Nelson, the head vet. I talked to Mark Nordman and asked specific questions after the limited amount of information we got in October or November, I guess it was in November. After that information came in, I was asking about specifics on this stuff, and Stu Nelson said, I don't know, I'm not familiar with that. And I asked him, have you looked at this stuff? Have you reviewed it? And he told me something to the extent of, I may have seen the test, but no, I haven't gone through it.
And this is the head veterinarian for the Iditarod.
Exactly. So the question is, who did then? Who did go through this?
And the man that oversees the ITC drug testing is Dr. Maury Craig. I don't know if he is currently working for Oregon State. He's a professor. There was some things, did a Google search on Maury Craig. I did, and it turned out he was fired for sexual harassment, bullying. He's appealing that right now. I think they're going through a process. So that's happening right now while this is happening. But he's supposedly, Dr. Maury Craig, the only person on the planet who has access to the name and to the codes. So what I know is that when I ask Stu Nelson who did look at this, who made the decision, who decided that this was a positive test, the only name I get is Maury Craig. That he told us that this was a positive test. And I asked, did anybody else look at this or review this? And I've heard of nobody else that has looked at any of this information. I asked about the information when they collect the urine samples and there's a name, and then the lab never sees a name. They see a barcode. So we get information back from the lab that has a barcode on it.
And Maury Craig said in an interview, I just recently heard it, but I think it was recorded a while back, that he is the only person that holds the name of the musher and the barcode. So when the lab sends information to apparently Maury Craig, he then decides what to inform the Iditarod about. And he also then is the only person, there's no checks and balances at this stage, that can say this is the musher that had that positive test. So that's a serious bottleneck in the system with no checks and balances. And that's where I'm starting to wonder what happened in that process. Did the Iditarod know about what? What doesn't the Iditarod know about? And apparently when I'm talking to these guys back in April and then later saying this is what happened, I did not give this to my dogs, we need to find out who did, where it came from, and how to prevent this in the future. And apparently they never even went back and looked at the test or anything to see if this is, if there's legitimate concerns or what to look. So I don't know how they made a decision without the information.
There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions. Right now, not a lot of answers. That's kind of what you're hoping for out of all this?
Yeah.
At least what's happening
We need more
today.
information. We need to know what the heck is going on here. But what has happened is we have been stonewalled by the Iditarod. The Iditarod has come out and made an assertion. They have stated publicly and very definitively that I had a positive test at the end of the 2017 Iditarod. If they're going to make that claim, I think it is fair and just that they prove that claim. So they have also just recently passed a rule saying that the burden of proof is on the musher. So I have to prove that I didn't do something. And to do that, I then have to be able to prove who did, apparently. And to do that, I need some information. And they are not giving me the information that allows us to do that. So they say, you have to prove it, but yet we're not going to give you any information to do it. I mean, so we've got some documents, but it's not what we need. I mean, it's a small portion that's very specific to tramadol that could have been from any dog, not just from the Iditarod. Who knows? I don't know whose urine we're even looking at. It could be ours. I don't know.
Nothing directly ties.
So how do we figure out the puzzle if they won't give us the pieces? And the next question is, why won't they give us the pieces?
And so the last contact you had with the Iditarod was them saying, we received your email requesting the full toxicology report.
Yep.
That was it. So then the big question is why? It's hard to believe that the board would take all these measures to ruin you based on the fact that you challenged them on rules.
Sure.
I mean, do you think, could it be personal? I mean, what's going on here, do you think?
I think some of the stuff has escalated beyond the board or the organization trying to make the best call for the race and has become personal on certain levels. And the deeper we dig in this, a question that keeps coming up for me is, who made these decisions? Who decided this? And I keep kind of getting run around and nobody says, oh, I made the call, right? But I keep hearing, most notably, I guess, Andy Baker's name come up. I talked to Andy and he said this, or alluding to this is the area that this stuff is happening. So I feel like there's a small group of individuals, probably not, or I would say almost certainly not the entire board, but there is a small group that seems to run the ship, and they make calls somewhat unilaterally, apparently. And I do think there are some personal vendettas perhaps in there. And I think it's a little bit of a power struggle in some ways. I think the opinion from them is, you don't challenge me. And like I said, the more I dig in this, the more I find that this goes kind of right to the top of the board. And I don't know if that's the person that made the decision. I believe so, but I don't know. I don't know if they ever did fully make a decision, but somebody decided to say that I had a positive test. I think I deserve to know who and with what information. And if it's based on personal history, I don't know.
So it seemed pretty obvious what you want. What would you like to see come out of all of this? I mean, there's a lot of things. Your name has been dragged through the mud and people kicking you while you're down. You want your name cleared.
Right now, I have tried everything we can to, without rocking the boat more than necessary, get the information we need from the Iditarod. We have consistently been stonewalled for whatever reasons. I don't know why, and that's a big question here. If this information, if everything is hunky-dory, if what the Iditarod said about we collected the samples here, then it went here, and then it went to the lab, and here's the report, and everything's in order, why can't I see it? Why won't they share that with me? This has been months and months. We deserve resolution on this stuff. It needs to be dealt with. They cannot just put this information out there and say, we don't know. That's not an acceptable answer from the Iditarod. We have to figure this out. I have tried to figure it out. I have tried to get information from them. That's been nearly impossible. So at this point, I'm in a position of saying, you know what, if you're going to make this claim, I put it on you to prove it. Show me a positive test. Show me the proof. If you're going to claim that I had a positive test and that I did this, they're certainly asserting that I did this personally, I gave it to my dogs. If they're making that assertion, prove it. Because me trying to get information from them to be able to create a counter case has been stonewalled again and again and again. So at this point, I am calling for them to have a public hearing. Would be great by me. Let's see the information that you used to make this determination. I want to know who made this determination, and I think it's important that the responsible parties resign or be removed from the Iditarod. So if they're going to make this claim, I think it's on them to prove it.
And unfortunately, kind of what was the catalyst for even us being here right now and having this conversation was the rule change, which said the burden of proof is on you. And that's what you're doing, though, right now. You're building a case. And so you would like...
Trying to.
Or trying to. Well, you're doing some research. You've hired the lawyers. You're asking the right questions.
We have our toxicologists lined up, and they say this is the information we need, and I've got them standing by for a month, and we can't get more information?
Right.
I mean, how do we move forward if they're not going to share this with us? I think at this point, we are calling for that they need to show us the evidence. And if everything's in order, then that shouldn't be a problem. Show us the proof. Moreover, show us what information you had when you made this decision. Prove to us that this wasn't personal. Show us that there was actual evidence. Show us who you had to make your expert opinion about when this drug was given, if this is our test. If it is, which is a big if right now.
If it's your test.
Show us what information you used to determine whether or not these dogs were sabotaged. I deserve that. My team deserves that. I have one of the best dog teams in the world. I've been racing with these guys for years. These are my best friends, and they have busted their tail to do what they've done on the Iditarod. It is an amazing group of dogs, and that's what really irks me here, is I care about this team, and they have just been sideswiped so hard. They deserve the credit they've earned. I've got one of the best lead dogs in the world, Reef. He's got a two-time Yellow Rose winner, two-time Golden Harness winner, Yellow Roses 3 times, and he does not deserve to have some doping allegations. We did this clean, we did this fair, because we're good with dogs. We develop a team. My team deserves that. In Alaska, you do not insult a person's dog team, and that's what they've done. If they're going to make that claim, they need to prove it, and I am tired of trying politely to ask for information and getting stonewalled. So you know what? If they're going to come out and say this, prove it. And tell us who made the decision, with what information, and what expert witness, and when was our opportunity to show our side? When was our hearing? They acknowledge they never put together a panel, they never put together a board. They like to tout that we never asked for a B sample. My question is, when were we supposed to do that? When were we supposed to have some conclusion? So this thing was thrown out in the public with all the damning evidence they have, when their own people are saying, well, we know we can't find more damning evidence, so there's no reason for us to look. They don't even want to find anything contradictory to their statement. So I think we need to know.
Right.
And I think we deserve to know.
Got so many more questions, so much more we could dig into, but I think we just got to kind of let this play out. What do you think the response will be? Do you think there will be a response?
I certainly hope so. I think the Iditarod, and when I say Iditarod, I'm now speaking about the Mushers, the dogs, Alaska. I think we deserve to know what's going on here. And I think we deserve to have answers. And if the Iditarod, the organization, the board, or whoever's making the decisions within that board, and I want to be clear here, I don't think that every board member is crooked and crazy. No, not at all. I think there are a few driving forces within that board that form the decisions and make the decisions that have some personal history with me particularly. So I think that's a key aspect, and I think it's also important that as a dog musher, we need to have the sponsors helping us put on this race, supporting us. And I want to make a real point of, thanking these sponsors. This has been some bumpy days for the Iditarod, and I just want to thank them for standing by us, because the mushers and the fans, we want to race. We want to race. We want to have the Iditarod.
Sounds like you still love it.
On earth. I love the sport. I love the race. And that's where it's really bothersome, where we have this great operation, this great group of people, this great history, and it comes down to a very small group within that that's just a blockage. And it's making it very hard for everything else to function properly. So I think we need to have answers. We need to know who's calling the shots, what information they have to call those shots, and need to get this thing back on track. And like I said, I just want to express my appreciation for the sponsors sticking by us, because I think they care about the true Iditarod, not certain board members, but they care about the mushers and the history, the state, etc. And I think that's what the mushers care about as well. We just need to have an organization that lets us do our thing.
And Stan Hooley said you're welcome to come back. He asked you to come back, but you're getting set to go to Norway here at the end of the month, so at least 1 year off. You want to see some changes? Absolutely.
My family's been in this sport for, I don't know, what are we going on, 50 years here or something. Been racing the Iditarod since my grandpa helped start the race. He ran in the first one. Joe Reddington kind of, I think, nudged him in that direction. Got us bit with the bug bad. But I care about the Iditarod very much. And that's where I don't like seeing parts of us. I don't like seeing the parts of the Iditarod that are damaging the sport and the race as a whole. And that's the part that we're focusing on. So when I say the Iditarod, I don't necessarily mean the whole thing. I mean one small wedge of this pie that's, I think, causing a lot of problems. And I think we need answers. And I think one small change, and we've got a bright future. It's a healthy sport. It's a healthy, state that supports it. I think we just need to let that grow, and we need to have the right people in the right positions calling the shots for the right reasons.
All right. Well, we'll continue following the story and bringing it to the people.
Sounds good.
Thank you for coming in, Dallas Seavey.
Thanks for having me.
All right.